Well, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Hey, I got to be honest. I told my wife, Mindy, yesterday, I was like, we're going to have like 3 people in early service because it's so cold out and everybody was rehibernating. So way to get up and get going and get caffeinated. And I am probably over-caffeinated, so I'll just apologize up front. So we are glad that you're here for week 2 of Fixer Upper. If you missed last week, I strongly encourage you to go back and check it out online. Doug did a great job as always, but great message that he shared with us last week. Now, if you are not familiar with the show Fixer Upper, we're kind of using that as our theme. Here's some examples of that. This is Chip and Joanna Gaines. They have a TV show. And just to kind of give you a summary, this is what it says on the internets about them. So it must be true, right? Everything on the internet's true. So Chip and Joanna Gaines own and operate Magnolia Homes, a remodeling and design business in Waco, Texas. And Fixer Upper shows the process by which the couple turned dilapidated but potential rich houses into show places that are helping revitalize whole neighborhoods throughout Central Texas. Pretty cool. Combined Chip and Joanna, this is the thing I love about this statement, is really cool and ties in great with what we're talking about. It says, combined Chip and Joanna save homes that look hopeless, renovating the imperfect and revealing them as what they were always intended to be. Now, we're not talking about homes during this series. We're talking about our lives. And we serve a God who gives new life, who says that we are new creations through him. And he takes the imperfect, like me and like you, like the people we know, the people in our spheres of influence, and renovates them and changes them. And it can impact neighborhoods, and it can impact families, and it can impact our world. That's really what this series is about. A God who takes the hopeless, who takes the imperfect, and doesn't just renovate, but resurrects our lives. So I'm really glad that you're here. Last week, Doug said this: real life change starts with a new life, not just a new leaf. It's not just about, I'm going to do better, I'm going to do better, I'm going to do better. It's about a new life we get when we receive Jesus Christ as our forgiver and our leader. And sometimes the hardest thing is this statement. This is from last week as well. Real life change has less to do with willpower and more to do with your willingness to admit you can't do it on your own. Surrendering your will to Jesus. In a word, this is about humility. That there is a God and I'm not him. That I'm not perfect and no amount of good deeds or no amount of bad deeds can separate me from his love. And sometimes this is the hardest step for us. Let's just be honest. The hardest step for us is admitting that we're wrong. Admitting that we might have a need. Admitting that there might be a God who loves us and cares for us and invites us into a relationship with him. But it takes a step of humility to say that I am imperfect. I need resurrection. Sometimes I think the harder part around here, we say we want to make more and stronger followers of Jesus Christ. More and stronger followers of Jesus Christ. We say we want him to be our forgiver and our leader. And sometimes inviting him in to be our leader is the hard part. But he says, follow me. No upfront conditions. And so what I want to do today is I'm going to tag on to what Doug talked about last week. And he said real life change starts with a new life. But a new leaf follows a new life. Basically, if we realize who we are in Jesus Christ, if we realize what he's really done for us, it should change us. Our behaviors should follow our beliefs, hopefully. And we're going to talk about a guy today who was anything but perfect. And who had an interaction with Jesus. And it changed his life, but it also changed his behaviors and his trajectory, because he realized what God had done for him. It's a guy named Zacchaeus. How many of you guys have heard of Zacchaeus before? Right? Tell me something you know about Zacchaeus. Whoa, I have just a lot of mumbling. One prayer. What do you know about Zacchaeus? He was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. This is why I don't sing in the band. Hey, Clay, can I get an audition after? He was a short guy. I'm not going to make any jokes about Doug today, our senior pastor, but he's out of town, so there you go. What else? Anything else? Do we know anything else about him he was short? Anything else? He's a tax collector, right? That's the only thing we know. He's a tax collector and he was a short guy, right? He was rich. We're going to learn, and those are all true things. Those are all true things. So these tax collectors, let me just give you a little background of the Jewish culture. It's so funny, and we've talked about this before, but if you read the scriptures, it says there were sinners and then there were tax collectors. Like they got their own category. They were so hated. You know? They were hated because here's the deal. These tax collectors had to recover a certain amount of taxes for Rome. Rome occupied Israel, right? So they were an occupied nation. And these tax collectors were turncoats. They were traitors. So they got taxes from fellow Israelites, from fellow Jews, and they had to pay a certain amount to the Romans. But the Romans said, anything above that, you can just keep. And so they just extorted money from their friends, from their countrymen. They were hated. And Zacchaeus was not just any tax collector, he was a chief tax collector. So think like pyramid scheme, right? He was extorting from the extorters, right? He was taking money from those who were taking money from those who were, you see what I'm getting at? He was really rich and hated. He was getting rich off of other people, off his own people. He was a traitor. Before we talk more about Zacchaeus, I want to talk about another guy because it's hard to really get a sense for who Zacchaeus was because we sing cute little stories about him. So I want to talk about this guy named Bernie Madoff. Does anybody know this guy? Hopefully you didn't invest with him. For those of you that don't know, I'm going to give you a quick summary of who Bernie Madoff is. He's currently serving 150 years in prison without the chance of parole. He was the operator of the largest financial fraud in U.S. history. And it's estimated that he stole somewhere between 37 and 18 billion dollars from investors. Some of those were big name investors like Steven Spielberg and Kevin Bacon and some of these Hollywood people. Sandy Koufax, the famous baseball player, had money with him, and these people lost millions. Some of them never reported how much they lost. But there were regular people like you and me who invested with him as well, and he made off with their money. And he was convicted, but most of the money was never recovered. People lost their life savings, trusted this guy. But this is the one that bothers me the most. A guy named Eli Wiesel. He's an author, and he survived the Holocaust during World War II. He was in Auschwitz prison. He was a Romanian Jew. Survived the Holocaust, became an author, was a Nobel Peace Prize winner in 1986, won the Nobel Peace Prize. In 1985, he won the Presidential Medal for Freedom. He was responsible for establishing the Holocaust Survivors Foundation for Humanity, which was instrumental or is instrumental in the Holocaust Museum that we have in the U.S. He raised funds for this and invested those funds with Madoff. He reported that the foundation, which was founded on not just building a museum, but on preventing genocide and protecting human rights around the globe, lost $15.2 million, essentially all the assets for this foundation. A guy who was trying to protect human rights and ensure genocide didn't happen again. And this guy took his money. We have a word for this guy, but we can't say it in church. I mean, he's a scumbag. Right? Prison doesn't seem like enough for this guy. Like you want to just line him up and let everybody take a shot at him. I don't know if you want to hear that from your pastor, but I'd like to hit that guy where the sun don't shine. I mean, seriously. Think about if your life savings were invested with this man and he just made off with it. And you have no recourse. Yeah, he's in prison, but your money's gone. That's how the Jews felt about Zacchaeus. They hated him. He was reviled. So we sing cute little Sunday school songs about him. We know he's a wee little man, but he was hated. He was hated. So let's look at his story, because there's a story in here for us today. We're going to be in Luke 19, picking up in verse 1. It says this. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. He's on his way to Jerusalem, to the cross and to the tomb. And a man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector. We already talked about that. And was wealthy. That's probably an understatement. He wanted to see who Jesus was. That's a key statement for all of us. And for something for us to remember is that Jesus honors an honest seeker. And today, you may be here today, and you may think, God doesn't want to have anything to do with me. I promise you he does. He honors an honest seeker. He wanted to see who Jesus was. Maybe Jesus is who he says he is. Maybe this guy, Jesus, is the Messiah, the promised one that I heard about when I grew up in the Old Testament. This is Zacchaeus talking, right? Maybe if I just get a glimpse of Jesus, he'd heard the stories. Maybe he really is the Messiah that's promised. He wanted to see Jesus, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. Now put yourself in the scene. You're Zacchaeus or you're the crowd. You want to see Jesus. You either push your way through or you've got to get resourceful. So he goes ahead and it says he climbs up a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. So here's what happens next. Verse 5. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to Zacchaeus, "Come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." Now, the first thing that Jesus says here is he looks up and he sees that Zacchaeus, this hated tax collector who has robbed the Jewish people, is looking at him. He came to check out Jesus. And for some of you today, here's what you need to see. If you came to kick the tires of faith, Jesus is interested. He honors an honest seeker. Keep asking, keep seeking. And he says, I must. The word must here has this sense of urgency and immediacy. Like, it's got to be right now. Like, I want to be with you, Zacchaeus. I want to be in your presence. And what did Zacchaeus do? He doesn't just say, well, I got to get the house ready, or he just acknowledges and moves toward Jesus and welcomes him in. And then the crowd mutters. The crowd mutters. Now, I've got a picture here. I love this picture. This artist does. There's a lot of, like if you Google Zacchaeus on the internet, all these pictures come up, Doug's in a lot of them, but it's so bad. I ask for forgiveness. But the reason I love this artist's rendition is because Zacchaeus is in the tree and he looks as surprised as the crowd. He's like, me? Don't you know what I do? Don't you know I'm a bad person, that I've robbed these people of their money? That I've turned on my own people, that I'm imperfect? And Jesus is like, yeah, I need to be with you. Because that's who Jesus came for. He said, I didn't come for the healthy, I came for the sick. And we're all sick, right? That's part of this series, right? We're all in need of renovation. We are imperfect. We are hopeless without him. But he's in the business of giving new life. Zacchaeus is like, me? And Jesus is like, yes. I got to go to your house. I got to hang out with you because that's who I came for. And the crowd's response is great too. That guy, kind of like the way we feel about Bernie Madoff, right? That guy's a scumbag. But that's who Jesus came for. He comes for the hopeless, the unrepairable, the unfixable. In our mind and in our eyes. But that's his business, is giving new life to lost causes. And Zacchaeus came down and welcomed him gladly. And I think it's important for us to remember that we don't approach God on our own terms, that when he invites us, we can respond. We don't have to justify. We don't have to get anything right. We just seek him honestly. And when you seek him honestly, I believe he will respond. And I love the crowd's response because it's both right and it's wrong. It says the crowd muttered disapproval, right? I mean, let's put ourselves in the scene. There's a Bernie Madoff up in the tree. That guy's robbed me blind. And Jesus wants to be with him. The crowd was right in this respect. Zacchaeus is a sinner. What he's done is wrong. We're not saying it was okay. But the crowd is wrong because they think that Zacchaeus is beyond God's touch. And so I want to ask us today, those of us that are followers of Jesus, this question. This is a little bit of a gut check. Who have you written off? Who is unsavable, unchangeable? Because Jesus invites us and all of those who don't know him into his presence. He is in the business of giving new life. He says we are new creations. Who have you written off? Who have you closed the book on? Maybe it's yourself. Maybe it's a spouse. Maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's a relative. God's heart breaks for them, just like his heart broke for each of us who have chose to follow Jesus. He is in the business of renovating lives, of resurrecting life, of giving us new life. Who is missing out on what God has lavished on you if you are a follower of Jesus? Because we were all in need. We were all hopeless without him. And he's not concerned about the crowd and his association with Zacchaeus, but about getting close enough to connect with Jesus and change his life. To give him a new life that will lead to a new leaf. So the crowd is muttering, and what happens next is really cool in verse 8. I need to get a different stand, so sorry. In verse 8, it says this. But Zacchaeus, not Jesus. Jesus could have said, hey, I came for the lost, or I came for the sick, but he didn't. Zacchaeus hears the muttering, probably expected it, and says this. He stood up and said to the Lord, look, Lord, here and now. He's making a public proclamation. It's like he's signing a contract in our day and time. I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Now, let me just say something real quick. This is not about money. Money is an expression, or his giving of his financial resources is an expression of what's gone on in his heart. Money was his thing. Wealth was his thing. But what had happened is his heart had changed. And we moved from being a greedy person to a generous person. And financial giving was an expression of that for him. Now, here's a couple things you should know about this. First of all, the Old Testament law would say if you gave 20% to the poor, you were considered generous, right? That was the rule, but he says, no, I'm going to give 50%. I'm going to give more than what's required of me. And then it says, if I've cheated anybody, which he clearly had cheated people, he was going to pay him back 4 times. Again, Old Testament law, the requirement was you paid back, like if you stole someone's donkey or you stole money from them or whatever, you had to pay back the value of that object, whatever it was, plus 20%. Right? So if you stole my car, you got to pay me the value of the car plus 20%. He says, I'm going to give you back 4 times. So he wasn't just obeying the law. Something had happened. He'd been invited in by Jesus. His heart had been changed because Jesus had accepted him. He didn't say a prayer. He didn't walk the aisle. He just had an interaction with Jesus, and he realized that what he'd been doing was wrong. He acknowledged it by the way he responded. And when Jesus accepted him, it changed his life. And he realized what had been lavished on him, and he was so undeserving, and all of a sudden, he turned over a new leaf. And it was immediate. And that's what happens. See, a new leaf follows a new life. And our behavior reflects our belief. And that's what happened to Zacchaeus. His heart was changed. His outward expression happened because of what had changed on the inside, what he realized he had received. Now, his change could be seen financially, but it started with his identity, with his heart, because Jesus had invited him. And this is why we titled this message, Flipped by Faith. Because what he knew of God and what he deserved, he did not get. And it changed him. And he realized what had been lavished upon him, and it flipped. And he got a whole new life, and he got a whole new direction. And he moved from being someone whose heart was hard and was greedy and was all about me to being generous and giving and being about the things of God. So here's the question I have for you today. We ask this question a lot, but I'm going to ask it a little bit differently. What choice could you make? Or what's your next step in the renovation process? If you were a follower of Jesus this morning, he invites us to come and follow him. So what's your next step? For Zacchaeus, it was basically he began to be generous financially. I don't know what it is for you, but we all have one. Zacchaeus gives an offering appropriate for someone whose heart has been changed, who received new life. And it was public and it was immediate. And look what Jesus says in verse 9. Today salvation has come to this house because this man too is a son of Abraham. Let me stop there for just a second. Zacchaeus was the son of Abraham, genetically, right? He was a Jew. His lineage, his genetic heredity was Jewish. So why would Jesus call him a son of Abraham? Because Abraham was known for his faith, his trust in following God. And that's what had happened to Zacchaeus. Something had changed. And he began to follow and trust God and realize the grace that had been given to him, the acceptance that had been given to him. Jesus said, salvation has come to this house. He's saved. Hey, you're in the family, not because he gave, but because of what had happened in his heart. We're not selling salvation, all right? We're not going to pass the plate and say, hey, you need a little more and then you're in. No, that's not how it worked. This was an outward expression of an inward change. He was being transformed. Jesus had taken someone who was an outsider, who was an outcast, who was reviled, who was hated, and given him a second chance and turned his life around, a resurrected life. And given him a second chance. See, his faith was sincere. It was not just an intellectual exercise, but his entire worldview has changed and his lifestyle had changed. In a word, he was repentant, to mean change direction. And Zacchaeus' sudden generosity was because he began to follow a God who is generous, a God who gives and loves, a God who renovates our hearts and our lives from the ground up. I love this quote here. It says this: the Christian faith is the ultimate renovation experience. Because what is renovated is the foundational relationship with God through Jesus Christ. Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians. About when you build on a foundation, the foundational relationship is what is broken. That we are separated from God because of our sin, whether it be like Zacchaeus. You know, he was a tax collector, he was an extorter, he was a thief. I mean, we all have a brokenness in our lives. And at the foundation, that relationship is broken. If the foundation isn't right, and you can paint the walls, right? You can do things in the kitchen, you can, put in granite countertops and all those things, but if the foundation of your house is bad, everything else is bad, right? Nobody wants that. What the Apostle Paul speaks to is that the foundation, this relationship is broken, but it can be mended through a relationship with Jesus Christ, and you start there. The renovation process starts there. That we have a God who invites us in, no matter how hopeless we feel or how hopeless we think that person is. He invites us to be with him. Through the forgiveness of Jesus Christ, that's what we celebrated 2 weeks ago. That he paid the price on the cross. And when we surrender and choose to accept him as our forgiver and our leader, he will renovate us from the ground up. And it affects all areas of our lives. See, our behavior follows our belief. And for some of us, we may have accepted Jesus as our forgiver and leader, and we feel like we have fire insurance, or we're going to not go to the bad place, we're going to go to the good place, or whatever. But there's so much more to that. He promised us new life, not just eternal life. It's not just hang on until you get to the end. No. He says you are a new creation. He has created you for a purpose, on a purpose, to do good things. He has changed us from the inside out when we receive it. See, when we accept Jesus Christ as our forgiver and leader, this allows renovation to take place in other areas of our life. In our relationships, in our marriages, in our work, in our finances. In the words we speak. Really just in the way we view the world. And that's what we see in Zacchaeus. His was dramatic, his was immediate. For some of us, it's more of a process. For some of us, it is quicker. But we are all in process. We are all in renovation. And this side of eternity, we're going to need it. We're going to need some home maintenance. And we get that by connecting to Jesus Christ ongoing. On Easter Sunday, Doug said this: the resurrecting life is what he does. The resurrecting life is what he does and who he is. Jesus rose from the dead to give us new life. In this life and in eternity. Because real life change starts with a new life, but a new leaf follows a new life. A new leaf follows a new life. We see it in Zacchaeus' life. Can you go back to the slide, verse 10? I'm sorry, I jumped off sides. Just for the record, the booth does a great job, and whenever there's a mistake, it's usually the teacher. So I want to point out verse 10. It says, "For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost." This is what Jesus is about. And if you are a follower in Jesus Christ, if this is your church and you call Live Oak your church home, this is what we should be about. We should care more about those who are on the outside than those who are on the inside. That doesn't mean we don't value those on the inside. That's not what I'm saying. But this is what Jesus was about. And he says it over and over and over again. He says, I didn't come for the healthy. I came for the sick. I didn't come for the righteous, but I came for the unrighteous. And the interactions he has over and over and over was always people on the outside. This should be our heartbeat as a church and as individuals. And that's why I want to ask this question again. Who have you written off? Who have you closed the book on? Who have you seen as unchangeable? Because we have a God who's in the renovation business. Actually, he's in the resurrection business. He takes what is dead and old and broken down and hopeless and gives new life. I know that's what happened to me. And for many of you could tell the same story. So who could we invite? Who could we include? Who have we written off? Because we have been lavished with new life. And real life change starts with a new life. But a new leaf follows a new life. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up with this. I'm going to give you 3 challenges, 3 next steps. I am very application-based, for those of you that don't know it. I always like to know, hey, what do I do with this? This is a great teaching about God's grace to Zacchaeus, about a life that he can change, just like he's changed in ours. That's his business. So what do I do with that? Well, I'm going to give you 3 next steps. Here's the first one. Invite. Who have you written off? Who have you closed the book on? Who could you invite? And I don't just mean to Sunday mornings. Yes, we want you to invite people to Sunday morning because we believe we have got a God who is in the business of creating and giving new life. Who could you invite? But maybe you just need to invite somebody to coffee. Maybe you need to invite somebody to sit at your table at lunch, students. Adults, maybe you need to invite somebody to lunch. Who could you invite? Who could you show grace to? Who could you extend forgiveness to? The second one I would say is this is not a giving message, and we don't pass a plate here. We don't talk about giving a lot, but we believe that giving is a part of the worship experience. We believe that generosity is a way for us to re-gift what God has given to us. The churchy word is stewardship. Really, it's just managership, that God has entrusted resources to us, time, energy, and yes, finances. And you can give at the offering boxes. You can give through the Live Oak app. You can give online. I set up recurring giving. You know why I do that? I'll just be perfectly open with you guys because I don't want to cheat God. I give him what's first, not what's left. And so we set up recurring giving, and every month it comes out. And then when God blesses us, we give on top of that. And for some of you, you may have never given before. Here's what I would tell you. Something happens in your heart. Something happens in your life. We think, oh, well, I'll help the church out. Yes, we need finances to keep the lights on and to do things. I get that. But it changes you. It changes you. I would encourage you to start by starting. I don't know what that is for you. It could be $5 a week. It could be $500 a month. I don't know. But you have an opportunity to practice generosity. This is one of those application things. New behavior, new life. It changes you when you give. Trust me, when I began to let go and realize it's not mine and see what God could do with it, it's amazing. And we have kids in this church who are in our kids ministry areas, and we see their envelopes come through $2 every week, $1.50 every week. Faithful givers. And I believe, and I've told them, God's going to magnify that for his purposes. He will do something great with it. And because many of you are so generous, we increased our giving away budget, our missions budget here at Live Oak, 104% last year. That's money that we just give away. That is so cool. And I just want to say thank you. I'm so blessed to be a part of this church, that we just get to give this money away to help further the mission, to help seek and save the lost. That's what we want to be about. But we can also give of our resources, of our not just our financial resources, but of our time and our energy. I'm going to give you 2 quick ways to do that. The first one is summer serve. In our kids ministry areas our kids are connecting in right now, we have faithful small group leaders, assistant leaders, hosts, and they create amazing environments. We don't have teachers. Notice I said small group leaders. These folks consistently are with their kids week in and week out because we believe relationship is key in communicating the truth and love of God's word. Week in and week out. And so in the summers, we try and give them a break. And there's an insert in your bulletin. You can look at that. But you're going to get trained. We're going to give you opportunities. You could serve once. You could serve multiple times. You could just be a check-in host. You could just welcome new families. You could be a small group leader or an assistant small group leader. You're going to get trained. But this is a great next step for some of you to step in. And maybe even just try it out. Maybe you wanted to help in kids ministry, but you didn't know how. This is a great way to just try it out once or twice or multiple times. Again, here's what I know about serving. I always think when I serve, I'm going to help somebody out. No, it changes me. We believe investing in the next generation. And then the next one these are outside the walls of the church at Lubbock Impact. This is in your bulletin as well. There's actually an opportunity coming up on, I believe it's the 17th. Yeah, May 17th. You can serve the meal over at Lubbock Impact. Lubbock Impact serves the working, poor, and homeless of our city. And we'll be serving a meal there on May 17th. You can use the Live Oak app or online. You just click the sign up link. And you can sign up for any of these, whether it be the summer serve, the sports camp, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, or the meal that is on May 17th. And kids are welcome to be a part of that. It's a great one-time serving opportunity on May 17th as we try and help impact our city. And then on June 7th, 8th, and 9th from 8 to 12:30, I don't know if this is the 6th or 7th year, I'm losing track now, but Live Oak provides a high-quality sports and rec camp for kids at Lubbock Impact. Completely free. We feed them. We have a great time with sports activities. We share the love of Jesus with them and send them on their way. Usually send them home with some food as well. For kids who are under-resourced and probably would never have an opportunity to do it, this is another great opportunity. It's 3 days, June 7th, 8th, and 9th. And we've asked people, hey, think of it as an in-town mission trip. Take half a day off work. You will not regret it. It is an absolute blast. So 3 immediate opportunities. You can invite, you can give, and you can serve. We are all in process. We are all hopeless without Jesus. We are no better than Zacchaeus or Bernie Madoff without Jesus. And he came to give us new life. That's the hope. And out of a new life, we are renovated from the ground up and we begin to see the new leaf. And that's what people are attracted to. That is God's number one plan, to take what was hopeless and lost and beyond repair and unfixable and renovate it from the ground up. And that's why Fixer Upper is such a great title for this series. Because they renovate houses, right? And it impacts whole neighborhoods. That's what God does too. He changes lives and impacts whole families and communities. And you are his plan A. And so am I. Let's stand for closing prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for your grace. Thank you for the story of Zacchaeus. Thank you that your plan is to take what seems hopeless and give it hope and transform it from the ground up. Thank you for Jesus' love and grace. And I pray, God, that as we leave this place, that we would leave knowing that we have a new life and a new identity through you. And that we would live that out. pray that we would continue to follow you. Wherever you lead us, to invite, to give, to serve, whatever our next step is. Pray that we would surrender our will to yours. We just pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for being here. If you'd like to visit, I would love to visit with you down here in the front.